The pack gathered at dusk in the stone circle. His territory. The air was damp earth and pine. Our alpha, Kalen Thorne, stood on the central platform, fists clenched. His voice, when he called my name, left no room for refusal. Every pair of amber wolf eyes watched me walk forward on the cold stones. His gaze tracked my every step until I stopped right in front of him. He made me stand there in the center under the rising moon. His scent, leather and storm wind, wrapped around me. It called to my wolf. I saw his jaw flex. The pack's silence was a heavy weight against my skin. I kept my breathing steady, my hands loose at my sides. I focused on the old scar cutting through his right eyebrow. He was looking at my face but not into my eyes. Then he said it. A flat, final tone, the ancient words. I sever the bond. A sharp agony lanced through my chest. I staggered back a step. The pain was a cold fire in my veins. He didn't move to catch me. His expression showed nothing. A low murmur of shock rippled through the pack. I straightened my spine. I pushed the pain down hard into a knot in my stomach. I looked up at him. My eyes stayed dry. "You were just a scared dog," I said. My voice was clear. It carried across the silent circle. I saw his amber eyes widen, just for a second. Then I turned my back on my alpha, on my fated mate. I walked away from the platform, through the parted crowd. My steps were even on the rough granite. I didn't look at Silas Volker as I passed him, but I felt his focus lock onto me. A visible crack, like broken glass, spread through the air around Kalen. A shiver went through the pack bond at my back. 3 hours later, the key shook in my hand as I tried to unlock my apartment door. I finally stumbled inside, leaning back against it. The scent of old paper and lavender soap usually calmed me. Now it meant nothing. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I walked to the kitchen and gripped the cold steel edge of the counter. I focused on the pressure until my knuckles turned white. He wasn't human. I had to keep reminding myself of that. The thought was a cold stone in my stomach, a feeble barrier against the raw ache spreading from my chest. The door burst open without a knock. Marcus Finch, my friend from the City Watch, rushed in. His arms were full of rolled maps. His neat brown hair was messy from running. He started talking fast before he even saw my face. "The Northern District disappearances, Alara, it's getting worse." He spread the maps across my coffee table, covering my books. He pointed to red circles clustered near the river. His words buzzed around me like angry flies, but I caught the important part. All the missing people were last seen near the border of Kalen's territory. A fresh wave of nausea rolled through me, hot and immediate. Bond sickness. A deep physical revolt. My throat burned. I turned and took 2 stumbling steps to the bathroom sink. I barely made it before I was violently sick, my body convulsing. I gripped the porcelain basin, my hair falling around my face like a curtain. I hoped the sound of the water would cover it. The rapid-fire talk from the other room stopped. I heard his footsteps approach the bathroom door. They hesitated, for a long moment. Then his voice came, soft and completely changed. "Ilara," he asked, "what's wrong?" I heard the floorboard creak as he shifted his weight. I couldn't lift my head. I couldn't answer. The silence stretched out, heavy with his unasked questions. I just kept my head down, waiting for the next wave to pass, hiding the proof of my broken heart from my only friend. "He insisted you come, said it was urgent." That was Marcus, just before I left. He said Silas Volker had information. The rival alpha with the chain tattoo on his neck. So that same night, I stood outside the sleek glass doors of a penthouse office. The city lights spread below like a grid of fallen stars. I'd cleaned my face, tied back my hair. My stomach still felt hollow and sore. I pressed the buzzer. The door clicked open without a sound. The office was all cold steel and dark glass. Silas stood by the floor-to-ceiling window with his back to me. He didn't turn around. I could see my own pale reflection in the window over the city. The silence in the room was a heavy weight. I made myself walk across the polished concrete floor. I stopped a few feet from the large desk made of black wood. My left hand ached with a deep old pain from my scar. I had to curl my fingers to make it stop. "Sit down," Silas said. A flat command. He finally turned. His cold blue eyes looked me over from head to toe. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't mention the public severing. He just stared. I pulled out the chair and sat straight in it. I kept my hands folded on my lap so he wouldn't see them shake. He remained standing, which made me look up at him. He smiled then, a thin slash without any warmth. And I swear I could feel that smile of his like a physical chill crawling up my back. "You are alone now," he stated. He pushed off the window and walked around the desk, leaning on its edge right next to me. close enough that I could smell his cologne, something sharp and chemical like a hospital. It made my skin prickle. A rejected omega is a vulnerable omega, he said, his voice flat. Kalen showed his weakness to the whole pack tonight. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. I just looked past him at this single painting on the wall. It was just a solid block of black. I focused on breathing in and out through my nose, trying to keep it steady. My knee started bouncing under the table, a nervous tremor I couldn't stop. I had to press my heel hard into the floor to make it stop. He leaned in closer. His voice dropped to a low murmur. I can offer you protection. The kind he failed to provide. Then he reached out. He didn't touch me. His hand just moved to adjust a pen on the desk, right next to my arm. It was a test, a clear, obvious test. My whole body went rigid. A cold shiver ran down my spine and I couldn't suppress it. I looked up and finally met his gaze. And I saw it, the calculation there, the pure hunger for a trophy. He didn't just want my compliance. He wanted my silent agreement. He wanted a victory without a fight. Real quick, if you're here for the unraveling of a broken bond and the secrets a pack tries to bury, hit subscribe. Trust me, we're just getting to the good part. I couldn't stop thinking about what Silas had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. The heavy bakery door swung shut behind me with a solid thud. I stumbled into the kitchen's familiar warmth, my hands shaking so violently I had to press them flat against the cold steel counter. The metal was slick, with a fine dusting of morning flour. I held on until my knuckles ached, trying to anchor myself in the ordinary scent of yeast and sugar. Whatever I felt, I told myself it might just be the bond talking. But the hollow sickness in my stomach refused to believe that. Then Marcus, my friend from the city precinct, burst through the door. His glasses were slightly crooked from rushing. He carried a thick folder under his arm, and his eyes were bright with urgent news. He started talking fast, spreading maps across the stainless steel table before he even looked at me. Elara, listen, the missing persons cases, they form a perfect ring. A perfect ring around the local Alpha's territory border. His words tumbled over each other in his excitement to connect the dots. And that's when a fresh wave of pain rolled through me. Sharp and deep, right behind my ribs, it stole my breath. My vision swam. I pushed away from the counter and barely made it to the deep industrial sink. I turned on the faucet full blast, the roar of the water masking the sound as my body convulsed. I gripped the cold metal rim and kept my head down, my hair a curtain against the world. But the water couldn't drown out the tearing sensation inside my chest. The pacing and the talking stopped, just like that. I heard Marcus's footsteps come close. His shadow fell across the sink. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet and completely different. Elara, he asked, what's wrong? He reached a hand toward my shoulder but stopped before he made contact. I forced myself to straighten up, to wipe my mouth with the back of my hand. I turned to face him, meeting his concerned gaze with my own. I did not make a sound. By the next morning, the training yard smelled of sharp sweat and packed dirt. I watched from the shaded porch of the main lodge. Kalen moved through the warrior drills with a new kind of violence. He disarmed one man with a harsh twist of the wrist. He swept the legs out from under another a moment later. The fallen men didn't get up right away, they just stayed down. Kalen didn't wait for them. He turned his amber eyes toward the next pair. His dark hair was damp against his forehead. Then, during a lull, a young trainee spoke up. He was talking to the wolf next to him, his voice carrying. Heard there was movement, near the city border. Kalen's whole body went still. He turned his head, and his voice cut across the yard like a knife. Where did you hear that? The young wolf stammered, taking a step back. Just talk from the night patrols, nothing confirmed. Kalen closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He grabbed the trainee's arm just above the elbow. His fingers tightened. I could see the tension in the lines of his shoulders. His protective rage was a visible heat in the air. He shoved the trainee away with a rough push. The young wolf stumbled back into the dirt. Kalen stood there, breathing hard through his nose. He stared at his own hands like they didn't belong to him. His beta, Gareth, watched from the edge of the yard. His expression was tight with clear worry. This wasn't the control of an alpha. This was something breaking apart from the inside. Gareth exchanged a long, heavy glance with one of the pack elders. The elder gave a slow, grave nod. I turned away from the porch railing. I walked back into the quiet darkness of the lodge without a sound. My own silence felt like the only thing I could control. 3 hours later, I stood in the shadowed hallway outside Kalen's private rooms. The polished wood floor felt cool through my socks. I needed to see him one last time before I left the territory for good. His world had rules I didn't understand and couldn't survive. That's when I heard it. A low, pained groan from behind his door. It was a sound no alpha should ever make. I pressed my palm flat against the dark grain of the wood. I did not knock. So here's my question for you. When you see someone who's supposed to be unbreakable start to come apart, do you walk away to save yourself, or do you step closer, knowing you might get cut on the pieces? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for part 3. The door wasn't even fully closed. It just gave way under my hand. The room was dark, except for one sharp line of moonlight from a high window. It fell right across the bed where Kalen was lying. He wasn't asleep. He was curled on his side, facing the wall, his shoulders hunched. His arms were wrapped tight around his own chest, and I saw it, a tremor, a violent shudder he couldn't control. This was the Alpha King, and he was broken. I took one step inside. The floorboard creaked under my foot. Kalen went completely still on the bed. He didn't turn. His voice was just a raw scrape in the dark. He told me to get out, said it wasn't safe for me here. I didn't move. I asked him if this was the pain of what he'd done. He finally turned his head on the pillow. His amber eyes glowed in the dim light. They weren't angry. They were hollowed out by an agony I'd never seen. He didn't answer me. He pushed himself up to sit on the edge of the bed. He moved stiffly, like it hurt. He looked at me from across the room, and his expression was just open, completely unguarded. He said my name. It was just a whisper. Then he did the one thing I never expected. He dropped his head into his hands, his fingers lacing through his hair. He let out a single, choked breath. It was almost a sob. It wasn't a sound of weakness. It was the sound of something real finally breaking. I felt my own breath catch. After a moment, he lifted his head. His face was a mask of grim resolve. He said he'd order a guard to take me to the border, that I'd be given protection. He stood up. He walked toward me and stopped an arm's length away. He didn't touch me. He just looked down. I saw that old scar cutting through his eyebrow. I saw the absolute submission in his silence. He was letting me go. He turned and reached for the door handle to open it for me. I couldn't stop thinking about what Alara had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. The next morning, my kitchen counter was dusted with flour. I forced my hands into the routine of baking because the motions usually meant peace. I measured sugar with robotic precision. My fingers didn't shake. The scent of vanilla filled the air. I focused on the level line of flour in the cup and nothing else. My grip failed when I reached for the mixing bowl. It slipped from my wet fingers and hit the tile floor. The crash echoed the shattering I felt inside my own chest. I just stared at the white shards scattered across the black tiles. The sound was so final, so loud in the quiet. I didn't move to clean it up, not for a long time. I always thought the mate bond was a forever thing. Now I knew with terrible certainty that forever things could be broken. I sank down slowly onto the cool floor, right there in the mess. The sharp edges of the pottery dug into my knees. A low sound escaped my throat, but I didn't let it become a sob. I picked up one large, wicked piece of the broken bowl. A new feeling began to rise up through the numbness. This feeling had a single, clear name: survival. I gripped the ceramic shard so tight my knuckles turned white. I had to decide if this breaking would make me into a tool or a weapon. I couldn't stop thinking about what Alara had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. The cold night air bit into my cheeks as I stood on the cracked sidewalk. Marcus's old sedan idled at the curb, its engine making a low, rattling sound. I focused on that noise. It was simple. It was real. My own body felt like a hollow shell. Numb skin and heavy bones. I knew I should get in the car. I knew Marcus was watching me from the driver's seat, his face pale behind the glass. His world had rules I didn't understand. Rules I couldn't survive. My hand rose to touch the car door handle, but my fingers refused to close around the cold metal. They just hovered there, trembling in the orange streetlight. A deep shiver started in my chest and rolled outward, making my teeth click together. I wrapped my arms around myself, but the chill was inside. Alara. Marcus said as he opened his door. His voice was tight with concern. He came around the front of the car toward me, his glasses reflecting the dull glow of a distant neon sign. I tried to force a response to tell him I was fine, but my throat locked. Instead, I took a sharp step back. Away from him, from the car, from everything. The movement was sudden, jerky. His warm brown eyes widened behind his lenses and he stopped short. His confusion was a physical weight between us. I saw him process my retreat, the way his shoulders slumped. He didn't ask again. He just stood there, submitting to my silent panic. That quiet acceptance hurt more than any question. Then the vision hit. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't a thought. It was a spike of pure, white-hot terror that wasn't my own. It tore through the numb void inside me, a searing signal flaring across a broken line. I gasped, my hand flying to my sternum as a pain so acute it blinded me lanced between my ribs. My knees buckled. I stumbled against the gritty brick wall behind me. The scent of old urine and wet concrete flooded my nose. I heard Marcus cry out my name, heard his footsteps rushing forward, but his voice was muffled, far away. The terror was followed by a wave of fury, a rage so vast and wild it stole my breath. It was his rage. Kalen was coming, and he was coming now. I couldn't stop thinking about what Alara had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. The peak of the full moon found me on my knees. The cold light painted the clearing in harsh silver and black. My bones ached deep inside their marrow. A sharp crack echoed in my own skull, and I screamed. I clawed at the moss, my body no longer my own. My terror was a living thing. Kalen Thorne stood over me before I knew he was there. His massive gray wolf form blocked out the moon. His growl was a low earthquake in the quiet night. He gave a single command that wasn't a word, but a force. My human mind screamed to run, but my spine arched against my will. My skin rippled. My scream became a choked gasp. Fur, silver and soft, erupted across me. The sound that came out of my new wolf throat was a pure whine, high and thin and full of animal fear. I saw the nearby pack wolves shift their weight and lower their heads. Kalen's golden wolf eyes flashed with something like shock. Then his expression hardened into cold resolve. He moved with a speed that blurred the air. One huge paw pinned my smaller body to the damp earth. The pressure forced all the air from my lungs, and I went still. The pain receded like a tide. I lay naked and shivering on the cold ground. Kalen shifted back to his human form above me. He looked down with a stare that was harsh and calculating. He threw a rough wool blanket toward me without a word. I pulled it around my shoulders with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. His silence was worse than any command. I kept my eyes lowered to the torn earth beneath me. I couldn't stop thinking about what Alara had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. The cold gray light of pre-dawn found me standing in the crude watchtower on the northern border. I watched two of our warriors carried inside, their bodies rigid, their eyes wide with terror. Kalen pushed past me the moment they were laid on the planks. He wasn't human. I had to keep reminding myself of that as he circled the frozen men, his movements a predator's stalk. His head scout, Rylan, held out a small glass vial. The substance inside caught the lantern light with a sickly shimmer. Rylan said Silas's envoys threw that powder, and our men just stopped moving. Then the enemy scraped claws over their skin before retreating into the trees. Kalen's fist came down on the heavy wooden table. The sound of splintering oak echoed in the small room. His fury was a physical heat against my skin, but his gaze flicked toward the narrow window. It faced south, toward the city, toward where I had been kept. The faint, sweet scent of Omega still clung to his clothes, a distracting thread in the chaos. He forced his attention back to Rylan, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle jump. He demanded to know what Silas hoped to collect from skin samples. No one had an answer. "This is a new kind of war," Kalen said, his voice low and final. He gave swift, sharp orders to triple the patrols and burn anything touched by that powder. His commands were absolute. The pack moved without a single question. I just stood there by the door, my own silence a submission he didn't notice. As the scouts rushed out, a young warrior with nervous hands approached Kalen. He held out a sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside was a single muddy police badge. Kalen took it, wiped the grime away with his thumb, and went very still. He stared at the engraved name for a long, silent moment. I couldn't stop thinking about what Kalen had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. Dawn light crept through the high window of my stone barracks room. My entire body ached from the forced transformation. Every muscle felt like a raw, pulled wire. The door opened without a sound. Kalen Thorne filled the doorway. His expression held no warmth, only a hard and focused intensity. He said one word. "Shift, now." I flinched. My human mind recoiled from the painful memory, but the wolf inside me rose to the surface easier this time. It was a tired and sore animal, but it responded. The shift happened with a series of deep cracks and a rush of heat over my skin. Soon I stood on 4 paws, a small, silver-furred Omega wolf. Kalen watched the whole process with cold eyes. He pointed toward the open door. "Follow, do not speak, do not stray." I padded after him into the empty training yard. The hard-packed dirt was cold under my paws. He drilled me for what felt like hours. He made me hold the shift at the edge of change. He made me run laps until my lungs burned. I failed each time he demanded a sudden stop or a silent approach. My controls slipped like gravel through my fingers. Frustration made my chest tight. During a brief rest, he stood over me. His own pain from our broken bond was a silent scream I could almost hear. Without thinking, I reached out with my mind. I pushed a feeling of calm toward him, an instinct to soothe, an omega pull. Kalen's hand shot out. He grabbed the scruff of my neck and slammed me against the barracks wall. The impact rattled my teeth. "Never do that," he growled. The rejection sent a fresh burn through the phantom bond on my chest. Gasping for air, I shifted back. I leaned against the cold stone wall, the rough surface biting into my skin. "Where is Marcus?" My voice was raw. Kalen's expression just darkened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a clear plastic bag. Inside was a single, muddy police badge. I could see Marcus's name engraved right on it. "Your friend was taken from the border," Kalen said, his tone completely clinical. "Silas's forces collect omegas. They take them to a facility." My wolf whimpered inside my mind. A cold sickness pooled in my stomach. I lunged for the badge, but Kalen held it just out of my reach. "Your friend is either dead or a hostage." "Which means he's bait." He turned and threw open the gate to the main training yard. A complex smell washed over me, the scent of that border skirmish, of blood and strange wolves. And underneath it all, a faint, familiar trace of Marcus. "Your first lesson," Kalen said, his voice like ice, "is to learn the smell of his blood on the wind, and not react." Late afternoon light slanted through the high windows of the war room. I stood at the back of the gathered pack, my injured leg throbbing against the stone floor. Kalen pinned a satellite photo to the central map table. His movements were sharp, precise. He showed us a compound deep within Silas's territory. Then he showed us grainy, zoomed images. Cells, shifters with dull eyes and shaved heads. A collective growl rumbled through the room, low and dangerous. My stomach twisted. They were caging omegas like animals. They were experimenting on them. I pushed forward through the wall of bodies. The air smelled of old paper and cold coffee. "We know where they are," I said, my voice too loud in the quiet. "We have to go now. Marcus is in there." Kalen turned his head toward me. His eyes were flat stones. Wait. His alpha command hit me like a physical shove. My breath caught. I stumbled back a step. Every muscle in my body locked tight, straining against the direct order to be still. I had to clamp my teeth together to stop a whine. He turned back to the pack and outlined a plan. Weeks of surveillance, probing defenses, waiting for a shift change pattern. Each careful, logical word felt like another nail in a coffin. I watched his beta, his scouts, nod along. They agreed with him. My hands curled into fists. The grit on the stone floor under my boots was a sharp, tangible detail. I was the only one who heard a clock ticking down. I was the only one who saw a friend dying in the silence between Kalen's sentences. The meeting ended on his final, cold order. No one was to move against the facility. It was a confirmed trap. Then he looked right at me. "Alara Vance is confined to the East Barracks for her own safety." 2 large pack members moved to flank me. The room emptied, leaving me shaking with a fury that had no outlet. I looked down at my own hands, at the faint scar across my palm. Could I just stand here? Could I submit while Marcus suffered? The guards gestured toward the door. I walked out between them, my head down, my mouth shut. The heavy door to my guarded room clicked shut behind me. I stood alone with an unmarked package in my hands. A young messenger had just handed it to me in the corridor. "This came for you," he'd said. "It has your name on it." The brown paper felt slick under my fingers. It carried a sharp smell like a hospital and a deeper scent of human fear. My hands began to shake. I took the box to my narrow bed and sat on the stiff wool blanket. I stared at the plain wrapping. No one should have known this address. I used my thumb to tear through the tape. Inside, I found a familiar green notebook with a broken spiral spine. It was the one Marcus always carried. Dark brown stains blotched the cover and several pages. I opened it with careful hands. My breath caught. His tight handwriting filled the pages with notes about disappearances. Details about a facility that collected skin samples. Notes about a paralyzing powder used on the victims. My vision blurred as I traced a dried smear across a list of names. Hot tears fell onto the page and darkened the paper. The final page held a set of map coordinates, written in haste. Underneath them, Marcus had scrawled a desperate message. "They're making a weapon. Run." This was a trap so obvious it was an insult. I knew Silas wanted me to come charging out. The old bond mark on my neck ached with a sudden, deep pain. Kalen Thorne had given a direct command to stay. His will pushed against my own like a heavy stone wall. My every instinct screamed to go find Marcus, right now. I closed the book. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I slid the stained notebook beneath the thin mattress. Then I walked to the small window and looked at the darkening sky. I placed my palms flat against the cold stone wall and let my head bow. I did not make a sound, and I did not move for a very long time. I couldn't stop thinking about what Kalen had said under his breath in the war room when he thought I wasn't listening. The low hum of the pack hall's ventilation was the only sound after Kalen spoke. He stood at the front, my alpha, pointing to maps and photos pinned up on a board. The images showed the stark concrete building surrounded by woods. Silas's facility is not a base, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated right in my bones. It's a prison designed for Omegas. Our intelligence confirms experiments. A collective growl rose from the pack. It was this raw, angry sound that made the air feel thick. I pushed through the crowd, my injured legs screaming at me. The faces around me were just a blur of fury. "We attack now," I said, my voice way too loud for the room. "Marcus is in there." Kalen turned his head toward me. His gaze was like a physical weight. Wait. His alpha command hit me then. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure. A wall of solid air slammed right into my chest. My breath left my lungs in a rush. I stumbled back a step, every muscle in my body straining to move forward and just failing. I had to keep reminding myself. He wasn't human. This power wasn't human. He turned back to the board like my struggle was nothing. He started outlining a plan. It involved weeks of surveillance, securing allied packs, waiting for some specific lunar phase. Every single word felt like a death sentence for Marcus. I watched the pack around me. They nodded along. Their angry growls shifted to these low murmurs of agreement. Their acceptance of the delay closed around me like a second cage. I tasted copper where I'd bitten my cheek. The meeting ended on Kalen's final, absolute order. The pack dispersed, leaving me alone in the center of the hall. The pressure of his command stayed. A heavy chain locked around my will. I looked down at my own hands, at the faint scar across my left palm. I flexed my fingers, feeling the strain. The logical part of me knew Kalen was probably right about the trap. The other part, the part that remembered Marcus's laugh, just screamed. I closed my eyes and did the only thing I could. I pulled that Omega calm he taught me deep inside. I wrapped it around my own racing heart like a shield. Then I turned and walked toward the barracks, my steps measured and silent, that chain of command dragging at every single one. The deep quiet of the night found me at the edge of an industrial complex. Rusted metal skeletons of old machinery stood silent against the stars. I moved through them as a wolf, my silver fur blending with the shadows. My nose was low to the cracked concrete, searching. The place was a ghost town, empty, way too quiet for a supposed lab. A cold paranoia settled right between my shoulder blades. Every shadow seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the wind whispering through broken windows. I knew this was a trap, but I had to keep moving. Then I caught it on the air. A faint, coppery thread. The scent of Marcus's blood. It was old but unmistakable. A trail pulling me deeper in. My wolf instincts screamed at me to turn and run from this unnatural silence. My human heart hammered against my ribs, demanding I follow. I forced my paws to keep walking. One careful step after another. The scent led me to the base of this giant, crumbling smokestack. A single heavy metal door hung there, slightly open, swaying in the breeze. A weak, rhythmic scraping noise came from the darkness inside. I pushed the door open wider with my muzzle and slipped through. The space inside was a shock. Sterile white tile under a single, dim light. The room was empty except for a padded medical chair right in the center. The fresh scent of a wounded human was strong here, but Marcus wasn't in the chair. My claws clicked on the hard floor as I took one hesitant step forward. I looked around the empty room and my stomach dropped with a sickening dread. I'd walked right into the perfect lure. The heavy door behind me slammed shut with a final, metallic boom. A speaker in the ceiling crackled to life. Silas's voice, smooth and cold, filled the small room. "Welcome, little Omega, we've been waiting for you." I spun around, my body low to the ground, a snarl building in my throat. There was no one to fight. Only the smooth white walls and the sealed door. I was completely trapped. I stood there in the blinding silence, my breath coming in sharp pants. I did not make a sound. The heavy metal door clicked shut behind me with this final sound of grinding steel. I stood in a vast industrial chamber under harsh white lights. My friend Marcus was chained to a central steel platform, his head slumped forward. A section of the wall slid open without a sound. Silas Volker stepped out, a man with cold blue eyes. He stood beside Marcus and smiled this thin, terrible smile. I lunged toward the platform without a single thought. A wall of shimmering air snapped up in front of me. The impact threw me back onto the concrete floor. My shoulder screamed with a sharp, sudden pain. I scrambled to my feet just as more of those force fields sealed the room's exits. "You are predictable," Silas said. His voice was calm and clear in the empty space. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I don't want Omegas for their submission. I want the one who refused it." He held up a device like a gun. It was filled with a shimmering silver powder. I recognized it from the border skirmish. My throat tightened with a dry, awful fear. "Your feral energy is a weapon," he said. "It can break the destined order that gives alphas their power. A bond you can reject is a law you can defy." The device started to whine, this high, piercing sound that drilled right into my skull. Every Omega instinct I had was screaming at me to look down, to bare my throat, to just give up. I locked my knees. I kept my eyes on his. Whatever I was feeling, it might just be the bond talking. I would not give him my silence. That's when Marcus stirred. His head lifted, slow and painful. His eyes opened and met mine. They were full of this desperate, silent warning. "Don't." Silas aimed the device right at my chest. And then, boom, a deep, shuddering explosion echoed through the whole facility. The floor jumped under my feet. Dust and rust flakes rained down from the ceiling panels above us. Silas flinched. Just for a second, his clinical focus broke. He glanced toward the sound. That was all I needed. I couldn't stop thinking about what Alara had muttered under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. A weakness in the system. A manual override, old and forgotten, in every containment room. The guards by the sealed door were raising their weapons, shouting to each other. The weak scraping sound from inside the chamber, Marcus trying to get free, had stopped. My fear for him was a cold stone in my chest. I had to reach him before the fighting did. I moved while they were distracted. My steps were silent on the gritty concrete. I reached the heavy metal door just as a second, closer explosion shook the walls. The door was open a crack. I slipped inside. The air was thick. Blood, chemical cleaner. My eyes adjusted to the low, red emergency light. Marcus was chained to a chair in the center of the room. His head was slumped forward. One of his hands was moving, slow and weak, scraping a loose bolt against the floor. I ran to him and dropped to my knees. I put my hands on his face. His skin was cold and damp with sweat. He blinked up at me. His glasses were gone. His eyes were unfocused. "Alara," he whispered. His voice was thin, cracked. "They took pictures of my skin." Rage burned hot and sharp in my throat. I swallowed it down. I had to be calm. For him, I looked at the thick cuffs around his wrists. They were locked with a heavy mechanism I knew I couldn't break. Then, a roar, pure fury, and the crash of breaking metal echoed down the corridor. A sound I knew. A sound that was burned into me. Kalen. Hope and dread twisted together inside me, a sickening knot. Him being here meant safety. Him being here also meant he'd broken his own plan. He'd come for me. The bond between us screamed with his protective fury. I could feel it, like a live wire under my skin. I ignored it. I focused on Marcus. I searched the room, my hands shaking, patting down his pockets for a key, a tool, anything. He winced at my touch. "I'm sorry," I said. My voice was steadier than my hands. I found nothing. The door to the chamber burst inward with a shriek of tearing metal. Kalen stood in the doorway. His massive alpha wolf form filled the space. His dark fur was matted with blood that wasn't his. His golden eyes found me, then they found Marcus. He let out a low, warning growl. I stood up. I placed my body between him and my friend. I didn't speak. I lowered my gaze from his. I let my shoulders slump in the clearest sign of submission I could manage. I let the silence stretch. I offered him the one thing I knew his wolf needed most in all that chaos. I offered him control. I couldn't stop thinking about what Kalen had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. Back in the woods after the rejection, just 3 words. I had to. The whole facility shook with a deep boom from somewhere far above us. Kalen stood framed in the shattered doorway he'd just broken through, his massive chest heaving from the fight to get here. The erratic light from broken fixtures swung across his furious face, and I ignored his last command. I lunged for the control panel instead. My hand slammed down on the release switch for Marcus's chains. The heavy manacles around his wrists snapped open with a sharp hiss of hydraulics. Marcus slumped forward into my arms, his dead weight almost pulling us both to the cold metal floor. Silas Valker watched from the other side of the platform. He didn't look angry about the explosion or Kalen's arrival. His expression held something like reverence. "You see, King," he said to Kalen, his voice calm over the distant alarms. "She defies even you. Her will is a beautiful flaw." I tightened my hold on Marcus. His weak breathing brushed my neck. Kalen took a single step into the room. His gaze locked on Silas, but his next words were for me. "Get your human and move to the door," he growled. It wasn't a request. It was a direct alpha command. My muscles locked up with the raw need to obey. I shifted my grip under Marcus's shoulders. My legs trembled from the effort of holding us both upright. Every instinct screamed at me to follow the order, to seek safety behind my alpha, so I made my feet move. I dragged Marcus with me, one stumbling step toward Kalen and the exit. My eyes stayed on Silas. He smiled as I moved, as if my slow, forced retreat proved his point. A fresh wave of pain shot up my side from my earlier injuries. I bit down on a gasp. Submission would keep Marcus alive. It would get us out. I bowed my head, letting my hair curtain my face, and took another step. Kalen moved past me in a blur. He placed his body between us and Silas, his broad back blocking my view of our enemy completely. "Go," he said again, his voice lower now. This time it held no command, only a harsh, grating urgency. I used his protection as a shield and pulled Marcus toward the broken doorway. The cracked concrete bit into my boots. I did not look back. I did not speak. I focused on the weight in my arms and the open path ahead. My silence felt heavier than any chains Silas could have forged. I accepted its cost with every step that took me away from the fight, and toward a different kind of survival. The heavy silence after the explosion rang in my ears. I stood between the control panel and Marcus, who was still chained to the wall. Silas stepped from the shadows. His smile showed too many teeth. Kalen was framed in the shattered doorway across the room, too far away to reach me. Silas took another step toward Marcus. My Omega instincts screamed at me to cower, to submit to the stronger Alpha. My human heart refused. He isn't human, I had to keep reminding myself. He isn't human. I planted my feet on the cold concrete. I didn't step back to protect myself. I stepped forward, placing myself directly in front of Marcus. Silas's smile faded into a look of cold, clinical interest. I didn't speak. I let my movement be my answer. I focused on the storm inside me. I wrapped my fear around my anger. I bundled my defiance tight. Then I pushed it all out. A visible wave of silver energy pulsed from my chest. It washed over the room without a sound. It didn't hit like a physical blow. It seeped into the mind like water through cracks. The armed guards near Silas froze. Their aggressive stances went slack, their eyes glazing over with a forced, unnatural calm. Silas himself staggered back one step. He clutched his head with a snarl that died in his throat. Across the chamber, Kalen slumped against the doorframe. His massive shoulders sagged. His furious expression melted into pure, unguarded shock. The energy snapped back into me with a brutal jerk. It felt like a rope yanking my spine. Every bit of strength left my body at once. My vision tunneled into a dark point. The last thing I heard was the thud of my own knees hitting the floor. Then there was only silence, and nothing. The utility corridor was narrow and damp, only minutes after I'd left the unconscious guard behind. My boots made no sound on the grated metal floor. The air carried a constant electrical hum from the overhead lights. I kept my breathing shallow and even, despite the ache in my ribs. Every intersection looked the same, sterile white walls and numbered placards. I strained my ears for any sound of footsteps or alarms. My hope was a fragile thing as I searched for any sign of Marcus. I turned another corner and saw a different door at the end. This one was solid metal with a reinforced window. A red sign marked it as archives and restricted. My pulse jumped against my throat. This could be where they kept prisoner records. Logs. I needed to see inside before I made a decision. I pressed my back against the wall beside the window, took a slow breath, risked a glance through the thick glass. The room was lined with filing cabinets and a single desk. And Cora, Silas's lieutenant, stood at that desk reviewing a file, her blonde hair pulled into a severe knot. I froze as her eyes lifted from the papers. Her gaze met mine through the window and her professional focus just shattered. It turned into this sharp, immediate recognition. A slow smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a hunter who'd finally cornered her quarry. She didn't shout. She didn't rush the door. She just placed her file down with this deliberate calm, her movements smooth and practiced. Then she turned from the desk and walked toward the intercom panel on the wall inside her room. Her eyes never left mine. My breath caught in my chest. My hands went cold. I knew I should run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. Cora pressed the intercom button with one polished fingernail. Her voice crackled through a speaker right above my head in the corridor. It was calm, clear, full of quiet triumph. She said my name like she was greeting an old friend. She told me Silas would be so pleased I'd come for a visit. She said I should wait right there for the escort. My muted scent control broke then. It just shattered from the sheer force of my dread. A wave of my omega scent, raw and terrified, flooded the confined space around me. I didn't speak. I didn't cry out. I just turned and ran back the way I came. The silence after the explosion was just a thin shell over the chaos below. I stood frozen before the archive door, my hand still raised from reaching for the handle. Cora, Silas's lieutenant with her sharp black bob, held my gaze through the window. Her finger was still pressed on the intercom button. A faint, tinny voice crackled from the speaker, asking for her status. She didn't answer it. Instead, she smiled this slow, knowing smile and shook her head at me just once. Then she pointed a single, deliberate finger down the corridor to my left. Her message was clear. Marcus is that way. She was letting me pass. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. His world had rules I didn't understand and couldn't survive. This felt like one of them. I forced my feet to move, leaving Cora and the archives behind. The corridor ended at a single, unmarked door. A new smell hit me there, cutting through the dust and concrete. It was the sour scent of infection and unwashed skin. I pushed the door open. Marcus was there, chained to a pipe across the small room. His glasses were gone. One eye was swollen shut. He looked up at the sound and his one good eye widened. "Elara," he whispered, his voice raw. He tried to shift and a pained gasp escaped his lips. I rushed toward him, my own hands trembling as I reached for the heavy lock on his chains. "Don't." He said it sharper than I expected. I stopped. His pleading expression was gone, replaced by a grim tightness around his mouth. "They showed me things," he said. He wouldn't look at my face anymore. "Pictures of you, changing. They explained what you are now." A deep shame washed over me, hot and prickling across my skin. I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell him I was still me. But the words died in my throat. He finally looked at me and his eyes were full of a fear I had never seen in him before. It wasn't fear of our captors. It was fear of me. "I saw what you did in the other room," he said quietly. "That light, that was you." I didn't deny it. I just knelt there, silent, my head bowed. My will to fight, to argue, to justify myself, it drained away completely. He was my last tether to my old life, and he was looking at me like I was a monster. I reached for the lock again, not to free him, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. My movement was slow, defeated. I heard a soft, metallic click from the door behind me. I didn't turn. I just kept my head down, my fingers resting on the cold metal of his chains, waiting for whatever came next. On the third day, the cell block lights were a constant, sickly yellow. I sorted the smuggled papers on the cold concrete floor for the 100th time. Marcus lay against the wall, his breathing shallow from his injuries. A sympathetic guard had risked bringing us the scattered files. He said we had minutes before his next patrol round. The evidence was all there but disconnected. I saw shipping manifests for chemical drums, prisoner logs with blacked-out names. My fingers were stiff with cold as I shuffled the pages. I needed the single piece that tied Silas directly to the murders. Marcus shifted with a pained groan and pointed a trembling hand. His voice was a dry rasp. "Bring me the top 2 sheets." I passed him a chemical requisition form and a daily intake log. He laid them side by side on the floor between us. His eyes scanned the lines and his whole body went still. I watched his bruised face change from focus to a hard clarity. He tapped a line on the manifest. It was for a rare, powerful sedative. Then he moved his finger to the prisoner log. The sedative was listed as administered to a prisoner on a specific date. That same prisoner was marked as transferred offsite that very afternoon. The dosage listed was fatal. His finger slid to the very bottom of the requisition form, to the clear, sharp signature. It was the proof we needed. A wave of fierce triumph tightened my chest, but I bit my lip to stay silent. The sound of cautious footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The sympathetic guard, a man with a shaved head, reappeared at the bars. His eyes were wide and darting. Marcus moved with sudden strength. He gathered the 2 pages into one stack. He pushed the rest of the scattered evidence toward me with his foot. He looked at the guard and rasped a single command. Take it now." The guard's hand shot between the bars, grabbed the papers, and pulled the damning sheet free. At that exact moment, the light switched from yellow to a glaring, pulsing red. A deafening siren blared through the facility. The guard flinched. He looked from the paper in his hand to the flashing lights, his face pale under the red glow. Silas's mobilization order was starting. The guard's risk was over. He shoved the paper into his jacket, turned without a word, and sprinted down the corridor. The siren screamed, and Marcus and I were left alone with the scattered evidence. The first gray light of dawn touched the rocky foothills above the stronghold. The air smelled of pine and wet stone. I stood beside Kalen Thorne, who watched the distant compound like it had personally offended him. A sudden blare of sirens cut through the quiet. Every light on the compound's walls flooded on at once. Kalen's head snapped toward the sound. His beta, a wiry man with a grim face, stepped close. "They know we're here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "This is the prepared kill zone we discussed." Kalen didn't look at him. His gaze stayed locked ahead. I could see the muscle in his jaw working, and I felt it, a faint, strained pull through the empty space where our bond had been, a silent thread of pure distress. It was so weak I almost thought I imagined it. The beta argued for a tactical retreat. He said we'd lose warriors for nothing. Kalen's hand closed into a fist, his knuckles white. Then I saw it. His eyes fluttered shut for one single second, a crack in his armor. A silent admission of utter exhaustion. When they opened again, his expression hardened into something ruthless. He moved so fast I almost missed it. He drew the ceremonial dagger from his belt, the blade catching the weak dawn light, and drove it deep into the rocky earth at his feet. The gesture was final. "Absolute, we do not retreat," he snarled, his voice raw command. "We adapt, we split forces. Their trap is at the main gate, we go through the mountain." He turned and pointed toward a sheer cliff face, a jagged wall of rock the patrols would never watch. A few pack members exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke against him. I didn't move from my place beside him. My own fear was a cold stone in my chest, but I stayed. He was the only path to the people trapped inside. Minutes after Cora saw me through the archive window, I stood frozen in a dead-end hallway. The air smelled of ozone and hot wiring. Cora turned her head toward the intercom button on her wall. Her finger moved toward the red plastic, slow and certain. My breath caught. My heart hammered against my ribs. Running would only take me back to the sealed door behind me. I had no path forward except past her. Panic tightened my throat. I forced myself to think. I remembered the technique. The way I could wrap my own energy inward, mute my scent. I focused on that core of quiet power. I pictured it not as a blanket, but as a blade. I pushed that feeling out through the small, reinforced window between us. I aimed it straight at Cora's reaching hand. Her fingers jerked back from the intercom like she'd touched a live wire. Her head snapped toward a file cabinet instead. Her expression went blank and confused for just a second. That was all the time I'd get. I didn't wait. I shoved away from the wall and sprinted past the archive door. My muted scent left no trail as I ducked into a narrow service corridor. A piercing siren blared through the facility a moment later. The sound was a physical shock. I kept running. The alarm meant every guard was now hunting for me. It also meant Cora had shaken off my distraction. I'd bought myself only seconds. I focused on the next turn, one foot in front of the other. Find Marcus before they found me. The blaring alarms shook the metal walls. I ran with my hand skimming the cold steel for balance. Marcus's cell was 2 levels down. I found a maintenance ladder and climbed into the detention block. The air here was thick with the smell of old fear and antiseptic. My own pain was a hot wire through my chest, tightening with every siren whoop. I found the cell, D7. I looked through the small window. There he was. Marcus, slumped against the far wall, his left arm cradled in a makeshift sling. I didn't call out, I just stepped back and kicked the lock mechanism with everything I had. The hybrid strength in my leg, it was a shocking, foreign force. The metal screeched. The door flew inward with a bang. I stumbled into the cell. Marcus flinched at the noise, then his bruised face changed, pure relief. He tried to push himself up. "Elara." His voice was a dry crackle. The bond pain spiked, a white-hot demand screaming at me to find my alpha, not stay here. I pushed it down. I offered him my hand. He didn't take it to stand. Instead, he shoved a stack of papers into my grasp. Proof, he gasped. His eyes were wide, urgent. Silas's network, the murders, we need to get to the main courtyard. I looked at the dense ledgers and manifests. The sirens screamed. Guards would be here any second. The packs are gathered there for the mobilization, he shouted over the noise. We show them this in the open. It breaks his authority, right now. It was a terrible plan, a public one, a suicidal one. The bond pain screamed again, a physical pull toward a private fight. I looked at Marcus's determined face. I nodded once, a silent agreement to his reckless logic. We moved as one toward the broken doorway. I stuffed the papers inside my jacket. They felt heavy. Final. Marcus leaned on my shoulder, his weight a sharp burden. We burst into the corridor. A 6-person security team rounded the far end. They saw us. They raised their weapons. I stepped in front of Marcus without a sound. The heavy thud of boots on metal decking echoed ahead of us. We reached a central junction. A wide space of bare steel and harsh lights. A reinforced door with a security grating blocked the way to the courtyard. 2 of Silas's lieutenants stood before it. Enhanced guards, thick necks, cold eyes. They leveled their shock batons. One of them, a woman with a shaved head, smiled without any warmth. I pushed Marcus behind me with my free arm. The evidence was a heavy weight in my other hand. The distant sounds of fighting from Kalen's assault were a constant rumble now. I knew we had to go through them. The male lieutenant lunged first. His baton crackled with blue energy. I sidestepped. I drove my elbow into his ribs. The impact sent a jolt of pain up my own injured side. He grunted. He didn't stagger. His partner moved to flank Marcus. I saw his focus shift. A cold fear shot through my stomach. Not for me, for him. My breath hitched. I couldn't control it. In that split second, the first lieutenant's baton grazed my shoulder. The shock burned through my jacket. I stumbled back. Marcus yelled a warning as the second lieutenant swung at him. This wasn't a fight I could win with human strength. The pain and the fear for Marcus fused into something hotter. I felt the change before I saw it. My hands twisted. Bones cracked and reknitted under the skin. Silver fur bristled along my forearms. My fingers curved into black claws. My jaw ached as my teeth sharpened. I didn't try for a full shift, I just let the hybrid rage out. I caught the next baton swing with my transformed hand. The shock sparked against my palm. I squeezed. The metal casing crumpled. I yanked the lieutenant forward. I drove my other clawed hand into his arm. I heard the bone snap. He screamed. He fell. The second lieutenant, the woman, saw her partner fall. Her eyes widened. She slashed her baton at Marcus. He tried to block with the ledgers. The blade on the baton's tip cut deep into his shoulder. He cried out. He dropped to one knee. The sight of his blood on the steel floor, it broke something final in me. A snarl ripped from my throat, a raw sound of pure dominance. It wasn't an Omega's whine, it was an Alpha's command. The sound echoed in the junction. The lieutenant froze for one critical second, her body locking up against her will. I crossed the distance between us. I seized her by the vest. I slammed her into the reinforced door. The metal buckled inward with a shriek. I turned back. Marcus was already struggling to his feet, clutching the ledgers to his chest with his good arm. We shoved our way through the mangled doorway together. 30 seconds later, we stood in a narrow service corridor. The air was thick with the coppery smell of fresh blood, the sharp scent of shattered concrete. My hands were still half claws from the fight. I forced them back to human shape with a shudder. The raw pain from the broken bond was a fire in my chest. It flared brighter with every step toward the courtyard. I could feel Kalen's presence there like a beacon. A physical pull on my ribs. I stumbled sideways. My shoulder hit the cold wall. My breath came in ragged gasps. It didn't help. Marcus, his good arm holding the evidence ledger tight, grabbed my other shoulder. His face was pale from his own bleeding wound. He didn't ask me if I was okay. He turned me to face him. His eyes were urgent, clear. The pain is data, he shouted over the blaring sirens. Use it. He's that way and he's alive, but if we just run out there, we're targets. He shoved the open ledger into my hands. My fingers left smears of dirt on the page. I saw it. The fatal sedative requisition, signed by Silas Volker. This is the weapon, Marcus said. You have to be the one to wield it. Your voice breaks his lies. The concrete task anchored my spinning mind. I looked from the damning signature to the reinforced door at the corridor's end. Beyond it, I could hear the chaos of the pack gathering. I could feel the strain of Kalen's fight. I closed my eyes for a single second. I pushed the bondagony down into a silent scream in the back of my skull. I opened my eyes and nodded to Marcus. My throat was too tight for words. I squared my shoulders against the wall and pushed myself upright. I took the ledger from him and held it against my chest. The movement was slow. Deliberate, it was the only control I had left. We moved toward the courtyard door at a careful walk. Every muscle in my body trembled with the effort of ignoring the pull. So I focused on the weight of the book in my hands, the rough texture of its cover under my thumb. Marcus kept pace beside me, his breath harsh in the confined space. He wasn't human. I had to keep reminding myself of that. His loyalty had cost him everything a human could lose. It hadn't broken him. We reached the door. I placed my clean hand flat against its cold metal surface. I could feel the vibrations of the crowd beyond. I took one last steadying breath. Then I pushed the door open into the blinding light. The moment we stepped into the courtyard, the cold air tasted of dust and torn earth. The battle wasn't the clean fight I expected. It was a scattered chaos of small clashes across the open ground. My alpha, Kalen Thorne, was locked in a brutal grapple with Silas Volker near the broken gate. Their movements were blurred with speed and fury. I saw the moment Kalen sensed me through our shattered bond. His head snapped toward our position. A split-second distraction that cost him. Silas landed a heavy blow that sent Kalen stumbling back. My chest burned with a phantom echo of the impact. Marcus, clutching his bleeding shoulder, pushed the ledger into my hands again. His face was pale but set. "Now, Alara," he said. His voice was tight with pain. I knew the rules of our world. An Omega did not challenge an Alpha before the pack. To speak was to invite punishment, to submit or be broken. My independence revolted at the silence demanded of me. I looked at the damning page in my hand, then at Kalen struggling to regain his footing. The choice was a physical weight on my tongue. I did not shout. I walked forward into the contested space between the fighting groups. I held the ledger open high above my head. My movement was deliberate, slow. A direct contrast to the violence around me. A warrior from Silas's pack broke from his fight and moved to intercept me. I did not stop walking. I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on the gathered wolves, on Silas, on Kalen, who now watched me with stunned focus. The advancing warrior faltered, confused by my silence and my clear target. I stopped within clear sight of everyone. I turned the ledger to face Silas's own fighters. I pointed to his signature on the fatal requisition. My voice didn't ring out with alpha command. It was flat, cold, and it carried just enough. "This is the proof of his crimes," I said. "He did not transfer your missing packmates. He murdered them." A ripple went through the courtyard. Silas's snarl of rage was answer enough. He released Kalen and turned his full attention toward me. His expression was pure hatred. But behind him, his own warriors had stopped fighting. They looked from him to the evidence in my hands. Their silence wasn't obedience. It was judgment. 3 days after the courtyard, I stood in the new training yard. My ribs were still tightly bound. The air smelled of turned earth and damp lumber from the recent construction. Kalen, his face marked by a fresh scar along his jaw, watched the pack assemble for the first joint drill with the survivors from Silas's forces. I saw Cora across the field, her posture stiff as she directed her former lieutenants. Marcus stood beside me, his arm in a sling, holding the now public ledger that had ended the war. He nodded toward the uneasy mingling of the two groups. "They follow the evidence now, not the man," he said. His voice was quiet but firm. I knew he was right. But the silence between the old enemies was a physical weight in the clearing. I moved to take my place in the drill line, my muscles protesting the careful stretch. Whatever I felt watching Kalen command this fractured pack. It might just be the bond talking. A young wolf from Silas's camp, a boy with wary eyes, stumbled into my path. He flinched back, expecting a reprimand or a blow. I did not speak. I simply stepped aside and gestured for him to go ahead of me in the formation. My submission was a choice, and it was silent. His shoulders loosened just a fraction as he passed. Kalen's gaze caught mine from across the yard, and for a single, unguarded moment, his stern expression faltered. His hand came up not to give an order but to rub slowly at the center of his chest, right over his heart. Then he turned away, his voice sharp as he called the drill to begin. The pack moved through the basic maneuvers. It was a stuttering, awkward dance of old and new. And then she walked out of the trees. It was Ali's, Silas's former head of security, the one we all thought had fled for good. She stepped right into the center of the training yard, her hands open and empty. The entire drill ground to a halt. Every single person just stopped. She didn't look at Kalen. She looked directly at me. "The facility," Ali said, her voice cut through the sudden quiet. "It had a secondary generator building. The manifest you found, They were copies, the originals are there. Marcus stiffened beside me. And? He asked, his voice tight. Ali's finally glanced at Kaylin, then back to me, along with something else, records of other packs, other alphas. She took a shaky breath. Silas was not working alone. Kaylin was at my side in an instant, a wall of heat and coiled tension. This is a ploy, he said to her, his voice a low growl. A last, desperate grab for power. Ali's shook her head, her eyes never left mine. I gain nothing. I lose everything by being here. The proof is 10 miles north, buried under a collapsed roof. She swallowed hard. I will show you. The pack erupted, a low wave of murmurs and shock. I watched Kaylin's face. I saw the conflict in the tight, white line of his mouth. He trusted nothing from that source. He couldn't. I looked at Marcus. He gave me one slow, grave nod. The evidence we had was enough to stop a war, but it wasn't enough to prevent the next one. I turned to Kaylin. We have to see it, I said. It wasn't a challenge, it was just the truth. He searched my face for a long, silent moment. Then he gave one sharp nod of agreement. Real quick, if you're here for the final showdown, you're gonna want to hit subscribe. Because what happened next? It changed everything. The duel reached its final moments in the cleared circle of the courtyard. I stood up on that metal conduit box with Marcus, my whole body screaming, braced against his shoulder. Silas fought like a wounded animal, desperate, too fast. Kaylin matched him blow for brutal blow. And then I saw him, the loyalist lieutenant. He broke from the crowd. He didn't look at the duel. His eyes were locked on me. He sprinted toward our exposed position. A knife gleamed in his hand. My chest locked up. I had no weapon, nowhere to go. Marcus shifted beside me, hissing in pain, raising his good arm in a useless block. I tried to reach for my power, but the bond agony was just static, a wall of it. I could only watch as the lieutenant closed the distance. Then Kaylin's head snapped toward us. His eyes widened. Just for a fraction of a second, he saw it. And in that instant, he made his choice. He turned his shoulder away from Silas. A deliberate, dangerous opening. His hand flicked out. A dagger flew past me. It buried itself in the lunging lieutenant's thigh with a sickening thunk. The man cried out and collapsed, but the opening cost him. Silas's poisoned blade, meant for Kaylin's heart, slipped past his guard. It sank deep into Kaylin's side instead. A raw, choked roar tore from Kaylin's throat. He didn't falter. He used Silas's own momentum against him, driving his blade up and under Silas's ribs. Silas stiffened. His eyes went blank, and then he fell. The courtyard fell into a stunned, ringing silence. Kaylin stood over Silas's body for 1 second, then his legs buckled. He collapsed to his knees, one hand pressed to the wound in his side. His breath came in ragged, wet gasps. I didn't think. I leaped from the box, ignoring the fire and my own injuries. I evaded the shocked, scattered warriors and ran to him. I dropped to my knees in the churned earth right in front of him. My hands reached for the hilt of the poisoned blade. His blood was already soaking through his clothes. Dark, and far, far too fast. So, I have to ask you, when someone shows you who they are in that one split-second choice that costs them everything, do you believe them? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you want to know what happened with those hidden records, and if we ever found a way to break the bond for good, make sure you're subscribed. The next chapter is already on the way.